This is a republic if you can keep it, with Mark Brewer and Jeff Timmer.
I'm Jeff Timmer. Welcome to the Another War with Canada episode of A Republic If You Can Keep It. Canadian officials cut the ribbon today to herald Monday's scheduled opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge, the long, decades-long awaited second span between Ontario and Michigan and between Canada and the United States at the busiest border crossing for trade in the country. Ontario Prime Minister Doug Ford today spoke directly to the latest Trump assault of America's number one trading partner.
Our relationship has been challenged over the last few years, and President Trump has threatened new tariffs just this month. But Team Canada has never been more united. And I want to make it clear, working with Prime Minister Carney will never stop standing up for Ontario and for Team Canada. Ontario will be ready to respond, and any new American tariffs will not back down and will negotiate from a position of strength as a top trading partner more than half of the United States. Because I know that both Canadians and Americans are better off when we work together instead of standing apart.
Because of Trump's latest tariff tantrum, no Americans were invited to the event. As we record today, the bridge is set to open for vehicular traffic on Monday and be a benefit and boon to Michigan's economy.
I'm Mark Brewer. Instead of presiding at a joint ribbon cutting, which had been planned for next Monday, midway between Detroit and Windsor, which would have been a great photo op, Trump will instead be a few miles north for a campaign rally. His campaign visit and admission that Michigan Democrats could flip 3 Republican-held seats in Congress. For Republican Senate candidate Mike Rogers, it could be a political nightmare. He'll have no choice but to join hands with a president whose approval rating is a pathetic 33% and still falling.
Governor Whitmer made some big news today as she endorsed Congresswoman Haley Stevens in the very prominent Senate Democratic primary here in Michigan, where polls show Stevens with a slight lead over Abdul El-Sayed as of late. Though El-Sayed is drawing massive crowds this last week at rallies featuring Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
The endorsement comes as nearly 700,000 absentee ballots already have been received by local clerks, and another 1.2 million absentee ballots have been issued but not yet returned. Today was the deadline for anybody who had returned their absentee ballot to change it. So a lot of those votes are already baked in, and early in-person voting begins on Saturday.
In Washington, Defense Secretary and Fox and Friends B-Team talk show host Pete Hegseth took a trip to Capitol Hill. The hostile reception he got from the Senate Appropriations Committee, including some of the Republicans, was enough to drive a man like Hegseth to drink, or in Hegseth's case, drink more. He wants another $90 billion to continue Trump's war of choice, one that he is losing and embarrassing the U.S. on a world stage, the war in Iran. And senators made it clear they were not buying what he was selling. The normally soft-spoken Senator Gary Peters from Michigan pulled no punches, lambasting the former Fox News weekend couch talker with this.
If you listen to my comments, you would have heard me say how amazing our warfighters are.
I heard failure. And the word heard. I heard exactly what you said.
I will tell you how I use the word failure, because I use the word failure to their leaders. You, sir, are the failure, not the men and women who are on that front line, not the men and women who hold up their honor with distinction. But if there's a lack of a winning strategy, they're in harm's way. Their leaders have failed them. And that's what's happening. We have political leadership. You don't have a strategy. You don't have a long-term plan to actually win this war. Win the war. The men and women are going to be able to do it, but they need to have leadership.
Hegseth claims that the Iran war has cost around $37 billion, and if you believe that, I have a bridge to Canada to sell you. Of course, with Trump's massive budget deficit estimated at $2 trillion and growing, the entire cost of this unending war will go on the federal credit card to be paid by future generations. And Senator Elizabeth Slotkin says the real cost is much, much more, way more than the $37 billion that Hegseth is peddling.
First, there's all the money you, as Michiganders and American citizens, are paying in your everyday life. Between all of those expenses, Americans have paid $100 billion out of their own pockets since this war began. That's just what the American citizens have paid. Now let's turn to the Pentagon. We haven't gotten clear cost estimates from the Pentagon. In fact, they won't release clear cost estimates. But we believe, based on all the math we've seen, that another $100 billion approximately is the cost already of what the war in Iran has cost in artillery, lost planes and ships, damage to bases in the Middle East. So that's $200 billion that the war in Iran, we believe, has already cost us.
Earlier today, the State Board of Canvassers voted to put the money out of politics proposal, send it to the legislature, which now has 40 days to adopt or reject it, or just let it. If they take no action, it just goes onto the ballot in November, or if they reject it, it goes onto the ballot in November. And so we'll see what kind of effect that's going to have on the fall campaigns. Mark, let's talk, or let's start our discussion here with the news of Governor Whitmer's endorsement. We've seen a lot of dynamic changes and shifts in this race for the U.S. Senate nomination on the Democratic side. Earlier in the month, Mallory McMorrow dropped out. She had run a very admirable campaign. Now today we find out she's managed to raise $12 million for that campaign. That's certainly not a slouching number for anybody, let alone a state legislator running for statewide office. But now it's a two-person race left, even though Mallory will be on the ballot, between Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed. What do you think of this endorsement by Whitmer? What would have compelled her to do that at this point?
Yeah, Jeff, this is just the latest twist and turn in this primary. I mean, you and I have been chronicling this now for several weeks. They had a significant candidate drop out. We've got enormous super PAC spending. It's become, in my party, a real ideological fight. So it's really an unprecedented situation for the Democratic Party. We've never had this kind of primary ever, as far as I know, historically. Even when we had contested races, it was never like this. So I think this was a coveted endorsement by Stevens. Whitmer is very popular in the state, which is very unusual for a second-term incumbent. But she has done some good things and has navigated the politics of the state. She remains very, very popular in the state, maybe the most popular statewide politician. But it is late. Right? It's not the good old days when everybody voted on election day. As we talked about in our introduction, a lot of ballots are already in the can and can't be undone. Today was the deadline. We're recording on Friday here. Today was the deadline for anybody who was already turned in their absentee ballot to try to change it. Everybody who's got an absentee ballot out there that hasn't returned it can still change their minds and get a new ballot. But it is late. And I guess the other question we need to ask is, why? Does this indicate that the race is tight and that Stevens feels she needs this last-minute boost? And it's frankly a little bit of a political risk for the governor as well to do this. I mean, suppose Stevens loses. That, takes some luster off Whitmer's reputation as well. So I think on balance, Stevens and the people in the group supporting her wanted this. I think it will help her, even though we have a lot of ballots in the can. Yeah, but it isn't going to help her enough on top of everything else. I mean, again, Jeff, as I started, this has been an extraordinary campaign where Stevens' spending has been dwarfed by outside spending. El-Sayed has had really incredible national figures come in on his behalf, has really energized a lot of folks. It's going to remain fascinating to watch for the next 10 days as we close out this primary.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mark. And I have not been privy to any backroom conversations with Whitmer or her team about this decision. It could indicate that, it's very close and this endorsement will make a difference. It could also mean, just based on watching similar endorsements by other politicians over history, that Stevens has opened up a lead, and this is jumping out in front of a parade that could be happening. It certainly, though, signals that Abdul El-Sayed is, at least according to polling that they're looking at, not out in front by any big margin. They wouldn't be doing this if they thought El-Sayed had opened up a lead. I had said last week or the week before on this podcast that I felt that the probability that El-Sayed wins by a wide margin, 55-45 or more, was as probable as Haley Stevens eking out a victory. And I still feel that that's the case. And this feels to me like it's close. My endorsement can make a difference. I'm going to go with the candidate that I feel best about for whatever reason. And people forget that El-Sayed was an opponent of Gretchen Whitmer when she ran for governor back in 2018. There was, it was relatively acrimonious as primaries go. Your competitors, things were said and done by the El-Sayed campaign back in 2018. And, politicians have long memories too. That could be a factor here. And so, revenge could be a dish best served cold in the case of Whitmer. I still believe that either candidate will match up well against Mike Rogers, who's the only Republican on the ballot. But he continues to poll like a generic Republican. If they put Jeff Timmer or Mark Brewer on the ballot as the Republican candidate and tested us in surveys against Stevens or Abdul El-Sayed, we'd be at the same place Mike Rogers is. He is a generic candidate running a 1990s acid-wash campaign, trying to be this 2020, hip MAGA. He's like Austin Powers waking up in that first movie. As he becomes unfrozen, he takes the long peek, and then he turns around and sees the Soviet general standing there with all the other NATO generals and whatnot. Remember, that movie was made at a time when Russia was being friendly with Europe, and he goes, "Communism won. I love communism." And that's like Mike Rogers. He disappeared from politics about, a decade ago, and he wakes up, says, "Oh, I need to be MAGA. I'm MAGA dude. I love MAGA." And so, there's Mike Rogers trying to, be the square peg in a roll. And the MAGA voters don't love Mike Rogers. The MAGA voters don't love John James. And so the Republicans, I think, are facing an enthusiasm problem at the top of their ticket, exacerbated by the enthusiasm problem the Republicans have overall, not just in Michigan, but across the country. And so I think that either candidate, whether it's El-Sayed or Stevens who wins, and I still think it feels to me like El-Sayed continues to have an edge on Stevens. So I have to commend Stevens for the way her campaign has pivoted and leaned into yes, I'm awkward. She has been an awkward on the stump candidate. She's a solid legislator, not great at campaigning. Not most elected officials aren't great at campaigning. Some are really good at campaigning and they're really shitty elected officials. They love running to the cameras, but not doing the hard work of legislation. I don't know. I'm not saying that's what El-Sayed will be like. There are candidates and successful elected officials who are both good at campaigning and good at serving. So I don't necessarily buy into the Democrats are in trouble if El-Sayed wins this because Mike Rogers is going to walk away. Mike Rogers has not walked away with this race when he's had an open field to put this thing away with money, with effort, and he hasn't done it yet. And there's a reason and that reason is Donald Trump. And the fact that Mike Rogers, with no primary, continues to link himself to Donald Trump when he should be pretending he doesn't know Donald Trump or know where Washington is right now and running far away from that because he has the luxury of not being in Washington and not having a primary, and he doesn't have to worry about pissing off MAGA in a primary.
Jeff, I can't help but comment on this. You're absolutely right. Stevens was very smart to play into, the attacks on her looks, the attacks on her speaking style, so forth. Puts me in the mind of a legendary Michigan Democratic Senator, Carl Levin, who ran against some very attractive Republican candidates like Jack Lausman. But Carl always said, short, bald, and frumpy isn't so bad because there's more of us than there are of them. And so
That's right.
I think Stevens has taken a page out of Carl Levin's very successful playbook on that point. Is it enough for her to win the primary? No, but it was a very good tactic. You're absolutely right.
Certainly, there's been a lot of attention paid to the amount of outside money coming into the Senate race. And look, folks, that's just the nature of the way the battle is fought now. There's going to be a lot of outside money. I don't put a lot of stock into which candidate has raised more inside the state versus which has raised more outside the state. Ultimately, I don't think that matters as long as they're able to raise money. But AIPAC, which has been the lightning rod in this identity crisis about the future of the Democratic Party, the Gaza-Israel split that we've witnessed, the AIPAC money turns into a pumpkin if Haley Stevens wins the nomination. Or if she doesn't, it will be there in the fall on behalf of Mike Rogers. The reason it turns into a pumpkin is because both Haley Stevens and Mike Rogers fall under or would be supported by AIPAC. And so that particular battle, which if I could wave my magic wand, I think the Democrats are having the identity crisis at the worst possible moment in time when they should be focused on one thing, and that's beating Mike Rogers, because that will potentially give the Democrats control of the U.S. Senate to provide oversight that has been completely lacking by the Republican majority now, that has abdicated its role. It's abdicated most of its legislative role to the president. It will enable them to engage in oversight and accountability. It will enable them to stop his appointments or his unqualified appointments to cabinet positions, the Bobby Kennedys, the Pete Hegseths of the world. And most importantly, and people need to think about this, Supreme Court vacancies. We have two 80-year-old Republicans who are rumored to retire. Trump has 2 more years left as president. The chances of a Supreme Court vacancy are large. The chances of 2 Supreme Court vacancies are significant. And being able to stop those and demand a candidate that is palatable to the Democratic majority in the Congress, in the U.S. Senate, is a substantial thing that can affect generations, as we've seen from the Republican-controlled appointed Supreme Court with the Dobbs decision, with the Calais decision. So many decisions. The president can do whatever he wants. He's omnipotent and above the law decisions. We can start to roll those back, take control of our country, restore the rule of law, reinstitute constitutional governance that this Supreme Court and Donald Trump and the Republicans are perfectly happy trampling. And so that's what's at stake in this election, not the future of the Democratic Party, though that civil war is being fought regardless.
Jeff, I want to pivot back to your fundraising point on AIPAC. I think it's well taken, but Stevens will not be without resources if she's the nominee. All the establishment figures in Michigan and nationally who supported her in the primary will be there. And that's traditional, right, in both parties. That, the super PACs and the regular committees of the congressional caucuses will show up for her. So she will not be short on resources. But you do make a good point that people should not, and unfortunately our friends in the media do this too much, should not focus only on candidate fundraising, because the campaign finance system has changed dramatically in the course of our careers. It's much more outside spending focus than it ever was. I will say this. I think there still is some significance to looking at the fundraising, and I would point to Jocelyn Benson. Her report out today shows she has raised $12 million. Again, that's going to get dwarfed by the outside spending, but She's in an uncontested primary, essentially. That's an extraordinary amount of money to raise. And she's raising an enormous amount of money online. So I think her fundraising actually shows enthusiasm for her by the Democratic grassroots. That's what I would read into that. Not that it's going to, again, make the difference in what could be a $200 million governor's race in the fall, but where she's getting her money and the fact that she can raise that kind of money, even in an uncontested situation in the middle of the summer, I think says some good things about Democratic enthusiasm. That's what I would read into her fundraising report today.
Yep, 100%. And the enthusiasm gap is the one thing that continues to be under-discussed, under-reported, under-recognized overall by most people by most insiders, by most reporters, by most pundits. It's why we saw Democrats in every single instance where there's been a special election or regular election, in the case of like New Jersey and Virginia last fall, since Donald Trump has returned to the White House now a year and a half ago, the Democrat enthusiasm has been through the roof, and the anti-Republican enthusiasm has been through the roof. Democrats shouldn't read into this that people are just suddenly now loving them. They're really, really, really unhappy with Donald Trump and the Republicans. And the Democrats, given the fact that we don't have real choice in our system and we need fusion voting and some other reforms, the only option is to support Democrats. And that's why Democrats, they are, despite what we're seeing in the rhetoric by Republicans, they are in a very, very poor position heading into the fall. We have 102 days left until Election Day. We're at the 100-day mark. The economic missteps by Donald Trump and the Republicans, coupled with the shocking, toxic immigration enforcement, the expansion of ICE, the execution of Americans in the streets of Minneapolis, those kind of extreme, shocking, criminal, radical actions, and then the just idiotic war where Netanyahu plays Trump for the fool he is, talks him into this idiotic attack on Iran, and Trump being just a ginormous ignoramus, continues to be dog walked now by the Iranians, and it has taken the Trump unforced error of the tariffs that actually caused inflation that Biden had beaten down, which was Trump's inflation from his botched handling of the COVID pandemic. And so Trump was the inheritor of a economy that was recovered, was starting to boom, and he threw a wrench into the gears of his own economic recovery. If Donald Trump had done nothing since being president, the Republicans would probably be right now riding high heading into November because the economy would be booming. We wouldn't be in this stupid war, and the people would be feeling good. We don't feel the economic anxiety, but they do, including a lot of Trump's voters. This is where Trump's coalition risks some erosion. I won't say fracturing, but it's the lower educated, lower economic earners, white voters who have been the bedrock of Trump's support, who are feeling the largest pain of this economy. Are they going to turn around and vote for communists like, Donald Trump will label everybody? Maybe not, but they're not going to necessarily be enthused to go out and vote. And in a midterm election, when Trump's not on the ballot, they're not likely to turn out. And Republicans need those voters to win. And without those voters, this could turn into a tidal wave, not just of 2018 blue tsunami, but the kind of 1964 was for the Democrats or 1984 was for the Republicans kind of, holy crap, we're winning races we didn't even try to win kind of night, where they're flipping U.S. Senate seats, governor's seats, Congress, state legislative seats, and they're having to quickly do Google searches to find out who these candidates even are and what state they live in. We didn't even try to win that one. We won Montana too. Who knew? That's the kind of year we're heading in because of Trump and because of the Republicans making errors that they didn't have to make.
No, Jeff, you're absolutely right. My leading indicator on the election this fall has become gas prices. I'm on the road as we're recording. I paid $4.40 a gallon for gas today. And the war in Iran just restarted. So I'm afraid it's going to go much, much higher. And that's the kind of thing that drives this home to folks when they see grocery prices continue to go up, can't afford gasoline for their cars in the middle of vacation season. Yeah, it's like Carville said a long time ago, but it's still relevant. It's the economy, stupid. And he could have been saying that to Donald Trump.
Yeah. Let's not forget one thing with gas prices, too. Historically, in August, September is kind of the height of the Atlantic hurricane season. And especially in recent years, we've seen growing number of storms, growing ferocity. And what those storms almost always do, especially any that enter the Caribbean, is disrupt oil refinery, gasoline refining in the U.S. That happens every single fall. And it's going to happen this year. It's because it's happened every fall as long as we can remember. You add that, if we have any reduction in U.S. refining capacity on top of the inflationary price of oil, it is a double storm for Republicans. It's bad enough just the every year hurricane cost of increase in gas that we see in the fall. You add this idiocy that's going on with Trump and the Republicans in Iran, and we could be seeing unfortunately see these gas prices continue for a long time. And there's certainly no chance whatsoever that they're going to dissipate in the next 100 days in any meaningful way. I mean, if Trump were to announce he's becoming a Muslim and grow a beard and become an Ayatollah, bring peace to the world, it's not going to have effect enough in 100 days to relieve Americans' economic anxiety. I mean, there's nothing he can do at this point. And the Republicans like Mike Rogers and Tom Barrett and Bill Huizenga in Michigan, or all across the country, the candidates running for governor in U.S. Senate and Congress and legislature are tethered to Donald Trump. And they're going to bear the brunt of the voters' economic anxiety in big, loud fashion this fall. And it's going to be recognized as a very ugly year for Republicans, where they made a lot of, they weren't just the unfortunate victims of cyclical economic or world factors. These are self-inflicted by the hubris of one man, Donald Trump, and the weak, craven servility of virtually every Republican in America. They are responsible, and voters are holding them accountable.
More on a republic, if you can keep it, after these messages.
When most of us think about polling, the focus is on those campaign polls telling us which candidates are winning. But the most important polls are for businesses, local governments, and nonprofits assessing the needs and wants of their customers or constituencies.
Those are polls that guide policies and lead to institutional success. Those polls have to get it right, which makes the choice of a public opinion research firm critical. Epic MRA has been trusted for more than 4 decades to get it right. Our clients have included school boards, statewide nonprofits, corporations, as well as the candidates and news media who rely on us during political campaigns. Whether it's just a couple of questions or a full in-depth survey, we're here and ready to help.
You can reach us at epicmra.com.
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve on Michigan's public policy landscape? Look no further than Michigan Information and Research Service Incorporated, or MERS. MERS is your go-to source for comprehensive, nonpartisan news and analysis on Michigan's government and public policy. But that's not all. A MERS subscription also gives you access to our powerful legislative monitoring and tracking tools. Stay on top of every bill, amendment, and vote with real-time updates, detailed reports, interactive committee transcripts, legislative analysis tools, and more. Whether you're a policymaker, lobbyist, or just a concerned citizen, MERS keeps you informed with daily updates, exclusive interviews, and detailed reports. Subscribe today and gain access to our extensive archives. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay ahead with MERS. Visit MERS.news to learn more and subscribe. That's MIRS.news. Don't miss out on the insights that matter most.
Well, that's our time for this week. To wrap up this week's episode, where I seem to have talked an awful lot, a note of optimism for the future from Murray Howe, the son of Mr. Hockey, at today's dedication of the International Bridge named in honor of his father.
Our parents loved life, and they loved people. They dedicated their lives to building bridges between people, between families, between communities, and between nations. This bridge will serve as an unmistakable symbol of the priceless bond and true friendship between the people of Canada and the people of the United States. In 2015, when it was announced that the bridge would be named for our father, I showed Mr. Hockey some renderings, what the bridge would look like, and where it would be built. In classic, humble, Gordie Howe fashion, he just smiled and said, "Well, that sounds pretty good to me."
And a reminder to our audio listeners to check out our YouTube channel. Help us expand the podcast universe by subscribing to the channel. It's free, there's no obligation, and we promise we won't use your information to bombard you with spam fundraising emails.
If the Republic is still standing, Mark and I will return next week. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Republic, if you can keep it, is a presentation of Michigan citizens for a better tomorrow.